All right, we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the stream. I hope everybody is doing well tonight. We are going to be picking up where we left off on the last stream, and we're going to do a little bit more world building. As you can see here, if you were following along on the last stream, we've actually done a little bit more. We're going to go over that, and then we're going to talk about. We'll probably get to mapping out some more features as well. But I wanted to sort of get a head start on naming things and really kind of mapping out the world as a whole, because the world being built first is one of the things that we're going to want to do, and then we're going to sort of weave the storyline into that world once it's mostly built. So we're kind of starting off designing that. That's going to lead to our feature set, which we've already kind of started discussing. So we're going to jump into that as well. And yeah, that's pretty much what's on the agenda for tonight. So, all right. Before I do that, though, I do want to just take a quick second and thank the supporters of the channel, starting with our elite partner, Javier Lazaran. That is the highest tier of subscription over on Patreon and YouTube memberships. I would also like to thank our partners, Goboles Inc. and Matt Oscard. That is the next tier of subscription over there on YouTube memberships and Patreon. And I'd also like to thank everyone listed here under the supporters section. They are a combination of the other tiers of support over on Patreon, YouTube memberships, and Twitch subscriptions. So thank you all very much for your support. It means a lot to me, and it's going to help me cover the cost of building this product. Because there are going to be costs associated with that. There's costs associated with even running this channel and hosting fees, things like that. So every little bit helps. So thank you very much. In addition to that, I would also like to thank everybody that is joining me here tonight, either live or otherwise. If you're catching the VOD after the fact, we do stream to YouTube and Twitch simultaneously. So whether you're joining me live, you're catching it after the fact, thank you guys very much for joining me. Each of you means a lot to me being here, because of course without you guys this project would not exist. So thank you for being here. I appreciate you guys. Okay, so where we left off last time was quite a bit different looking of a map. We had a lot of stuff in here like Zone A, Zone B, City A, City B, things like that. All of those things have been renamed. And we actually have a name for the world itself. I don't have a name for the game yet, so we still need to actually come up with that at some point, although I can work around that. That may even wind up being a last-minute decision. We'll kind of see where the story takes us, right? So what we're going to look at tonight is I'm just going to briefly talk about the changes to the map, and then I think we might go ahead and scaffold rather the actual game project tonight as an additional sort of goal. So I think that's a good place to start. All right, so where do we start? I guess I'll start with sort of the lore and how that ties into things, because we talked a lot about the lore, but we didn't really have names for the stuff, right? So the only thing I think we had named on the last stream was this Umbrathar and Duskvale, right? And so those names aren't changing. Those work really well. This continent is now called Dravenholm. So that's one of 3 continents there. By the way, the world is now called Illumina, right? And that is kind of a... it's based on the energy of light and sort of the life force of the world, right? So everything... within the world is based off of the life force of the world, which revolves around light. There are dark energies too, and we'll get into that. But the world is called Illumina, and that's basically the idea there. So we have Duskvale, which, as you recall before, is the result of the First War, and we'll get into some of that a little bit here in a bit. This was the former home of Dawnvale. Now it's Duskvale, because it is destroyed and the land is corrupted and cursed. And so Umbrathar is sort of the last bastion of power there. It's sort of the holdout for people wanting to maintain and even reclaim their homeland. So the people here are working to restore Duskvale to its former glory, or at least keep the evil forces there, the dark forces, from spreading. So there's that, and then we have the continent of Thaldor, and so this is basically where the player is going to start the game, right? Specifically around Zuldane, which is the name of the human capital that was built on top of the old troll capital, right? So they came over here, conquered this, and now it's called Zuldane. And there's some history woven in there as well with the name, which we'll get into for a second. You'll notice that I also put a couple of new zones up here, and I think I'm going to kind of go through here and split some of these up, because some of these zones are way, way too big, I think. And so I've kind of been going through and reworking that, adding a little bit more detail to the map to kind of map out how we want to do this stuff, right? So the first thing that we have on this continent at the very top is an area called Iskald, which is basically Norse, and the name basically translates back to ice cold, right? Which kind of makes sense. Brisk Fjord is over here as well, and so Brisk Fjord is basically the sort of main town. They don't really have a capital city up there, but it's the sort of the main town where those humans live, and they're sort of based off of Norse/Viking background, right? This is kind of what the theme is up here. So Brisk Fjord is named such because it's at the end of a fjord, which is right here. But we still have to map some detail in there, right? We haven't gotten to that yet. And it's notoriously difficult to navigate to, but that's where they built their city, right? Or their town, rather. We also have the Frostfire Expanse over here. And I just thought that was kind of a cool name.
Travis 168 high.
Smudge, how's it going? Good to see you. Thank you so much for the tier 1 sub. 10 months already. That's insane. Thank you so much for the support. I appreciate that. Let's see. We got some chats here, so let me catch up on chat, and then I'll go back into the mapping stuff. Tammin, good to see you as well. Welcome. Tonight I'm watching on YouTube, but chatting in Twitch, so there might be a delay there. Fair enough. Yeah, I think YouTube is usually like a few seconds behind for some reason. Cool. All right. So we're just kind of going over the changes that I made to the world map, and sort of starting to try and bring some of this together. I'm splitting up some of the zones. So we're kind of talking about this area up here. So the Frostfire Expanse right now is just sort of the volcano region of the world, right? So there's a volcano that's continuously active and erupting up here, and this is where our lava is going to be, and we're eventually going to have some lore around this. I don't have anything there yet, but I kind of liked the name Frostfire Expanse. It's just kind of what I thought of, and I wanted to put it somewhere, and this made the most sense, right? So it's sort of a fiery zone in the middle of a juxtaposed into a super cold area. So there's that. All right, so that's that. Silverwood Foothills used to go all the way across here. It does not anymore, and so that just takes up this area here. It's just kind of like a rolling, hilly plains, grass plain land kind of thing. It's like a temperate climate, so it's, or I guess you could call it a tundra, technically, because it borders on a super icy area, right? So it's pretty cold here, and it's a little bit high in terms of elevation. And then we have the Autumn Reach, which basically it looks like autumn here all the time in this zone. So that's its color. That explains its color. We're going to eventually have some towns and some stuff in both of these, but all in due time. And so there's that, and then there's the Verdane Forest, which is sort of the main starting area, right? So Briarglen is just kind of a small farming village that is at the north of Verdane Forest, bordering on the Autumn Reach. And then Zuldane is the capital city that sits off of the Sovereign Bay. So Verdane Forest is way too big right now. We're probably going to wind up chopping this one up too. I don't know exactly how I'm going to divvy it up yet, but I'm thinking probably this area here is going to be a slightly different zone, maybe that has sort of a different theme. And then I'm thinking of making this sort of like a dark, murky, sort of thick woods kind of down here. So we have that. And then further down here, we have the sort of troll territory. So this whole portion of the continent, this whole southern portion of the continent, is all troll zone. It used to be that Verdane Forest was included in that, right? But the humans took it over, they conquered it, took it from the trolls, and so there's going to be rather a border along here that sort of has armies on both sides in a standoff against one another. But Rukthar is the sort of zone here, and it's basically like swampland. It's like a jungle / swampland, I guess we could call it. And so I've got to add a lot more detail there, obviously. Zulthar is the troll capital, right? So this is in red, indicating that's enemy territory. At least it is when you start the game. So the green is friendly, red is enemy, and then we'll see over here there's one that is gold or yellow, which is sort of neutral territory, right? And then we have another green one down here. We're going to be adding to that. Duskvale is probably actually going to wind up being red at some point, just because it's super dangerous up there. But anyway, so we have Rukthar. Again, this is probably also going to wind up being split up, along with the Desert of Drazul. So Drazul, you can see there's a little bit of different color here. Drazul is probably going to wind up being most of this area here, minus this little peninsula, and minus some of this area here, just because I want to split it up a little bit so that it's not quite so huge. Makraza is, again, troll territory. And so this is sort of like a tropical climate area, right? So there's going to be beaches and palm trees and that kind of thing down here. And then we have the town of Talar, which is sort of a very, very fragile neutral. So it's the troll, essentially, port town. And this is what they use as their primary means of trading with other nations. They do allow foreigners here under very strict watch, begrudgingly, but they realize that, economy requires trade, right? So that is what that is. And so you will be able to go there, but obviously you won't be able to take the direct route down here. So that's going to be a much later place that you visit. And you're going to wind up sailing there, ironically, instead of marching down this way, because you can't actually get through it this way without going through enemy territory, which would not be possible, especially in the beginning of the game. So that's that. So between it and Velora, which is the other continent over here, we have the Lorien Sea. So that's just this big body of water here. Over here we have the Elderwind Ocean, and then over on the other side we have the Sea of Narathis. And so, really quickly, between Velora and Dravenholm, we also have the Shattered Isles. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this yet. It was kind of another thing where I thought of the name and I'm like, this would be really cool to have, but I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. And also between these two continents, we have the Shatterwave Expanse. So the idea here is that this is a super rough sea that's very difficult to traverse. Hence the name also the Shattered Isles, right? So in Velora, there's a couple of zones here. Again, these zones are gigantic. I'm going to be splitting them up as well. But right now we have the Ironvale Highlands, which is the home to the friendly group of dwarves. And so their capital city is within the mountains. It's called Thorinholt. And so that is sort of their capital city. It's all underground, right? And then off to the west, we have Wayport, which is a trading village, or a port town trading village, right? And so this is actually run by humans, not dwarves, even though it exists on dwarven land, but it is completely neutral as well. And this is the primary port that all nations, even enemy ones, trade through. And so that's the significance of this. And so this is connected to Talar, and so you could sail back and forth between the two. Hammerfield, I kind of haven't done anything with this yet. This is another vast rolling plains expanse of land. Again, it's probably going to wind up being split up. We have another border little dwarven town here that's unnamed. Not sure what I'm going to do with that yet, but that's kind of where that's existing. And we just have a few things down here at the bottom. So you can see I've split this up a lot and done a lot of detail down here. So I quite like the way that this is looking so far. Obviously, we still have some more work to do down here, but this is kind of what this looks like so far. So let me catch up on chat, and then we'll go through this. I see some regions have the same suffix thar. It'd be nice for these regions to have something in common. That would be the translation of the word thar. Yes. Places have names now. So beautiful. Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. Also, the region Umbrathar, I think that's the name, should be something darker, maybe even cursed. Umbral is sort of a penitence realm where souls go for development in some regions. Shadowheart from Baldur's Gate 3 was heavily inspired by this. Her name in Portuguese was Umbralma, literally soul of the umbral. Yeah, so I haven't quite portrayed that here. But basically the way that this is going to work up here is it too is sort of a dark and cursed land, except for the very center of the city. And so basically darkness and corruption has taken over this entire continent except for this. I don't have it really visually mapped out that way yet. But these guys are basically fighting to maintain what's left of their home and keep the stuff going on in here from spreading, right? It's kind of contained naturally within these mountains, but it could spread this way, right? And so these guys are basically fighting to keep that from happening, and they're even trying to push it back and eventually restore their homeland. So this is going to be much, much darker than what we have here. I just haven't got the assets in there yet. But that's kind of the idea there. So these, like the Zuldane and Zulthar, let me look up. I actually had in here. Where did I put it? So I think I put it in here. I thought I put the old name of the city in here. I know I wrote it down. Oh, here it is. Yeah, so the old city is named Braxul, right? So basically what the humans did when they took this is they took the Zul part of the name and they just renamed it as sort of a troll to the trolls, right? So they're like, not only did we take your city and build on top of it, but we also kept part of the name and renamed it. So haha, point the finger and laugh. So yeah, that's kind of the idea behind this. Some of these names are subject to change, but I kind of like the way that this one's going. Shattered Isles can be some sort of magical region where the magic is so strong that it's literally shattering reality itself. That's true too. Yep, we could do a lot with that, for sure. Thinking of flying mountains, auroras. Yeah, exactly. Floating land masses. Yep. That would be kind of neat too. Above just the ones that are in the sea. All right. Singy, how's it going over there on the YouTube side? Hello. Okay. So the Tirgora Wilds are basically a former troll settlement that's been abandoned. Basically, I should say all but abandoned. There's still some trolls there, but basically they abandoned it because it got wiped out in a major storm, essentially a hurricane. And instead of rebuilding, they didn't really find it worth it all that much to rebuild. They just went back home. And so this is largely abandoned, and you'll see that there's ruins in there. And so we're going to do some stuff with that. Again, I don't have any lore around it yet, but that's kind of the idea of that zone. So the Zorath Scar is what this sort of ruined land here is, where there's some nomads living here, but other than that, not really many people live here. And so what that is Zorath is the name of one of the old gods. right? And essentially, the lore goes that the humans that lived there essentially disrespected him and pissed him off to the point where he's like, you know what? I'm just going to destroy this whole area as a lesson to you all. And that's essentially why there's a big gaping hole here, and everything around it's dead. There's some lore behind that, and an entire religion that is based on this within the lore. So we'll get to that in a bit. And then we have the Wuyun Plateau, and so this is basically where that last sort of religion with the sort of monks that are very invested in environment and spirituality and power via focusing on the spirit and soul. That's where these guys live, right? And so the main sort of town in there is called Yunzai. And that all exists on this plateau, right? So that's where those guys live. And these are the ones that essentially say no to technology. They don't want it. They believe that's evil, etc., etc. They don't sort of look down on others for using it. They don't look down on others for the way that they operate. They're sort of a peaceful yet powerful group of people, right? And so one of the big land features is we have the Yunhu Lake, which topples over into the Yunlin Falls, which then creates the Tianlu River that flows across here, right? So that river gives us a nice border for some different zones as well. So we have Thornmire, which is sort of like a wetlands type of area. And then that reaches over, or expands over rather, into a tropical zone called Osher's Reach, right? Just called it Osher's Reach because it reaches way out this way, right? And so I don't have any lore around either one of these areas yet. And also you'll see some unnamed towns here. So we'll eventually figure that out. And then the last sort of thing that I wanted to bring up is Isetsu, which is the capital city that has all of the super futuristic technology and stuff. That is where that is located, is based out of, is out of Isetsu. That's the name of the city, and then Hoshizora is the name of the zone, right? So that zone encapsulates these two islands and probably a bunch of little dotted ones in between that we'll eventually add. And then we have Hoshinami, which is sort of a smaller little village, and basically this one is a sort of more of a blend between sort of traditional shrines and the technology. They don't go as nuts with the technology. They believe more a balance is more needed versus Isetsu. They throw technology at everything, right? And so there's that, and there's sort of the two extremes here, and then there's sort of the in between there. And yeah, that is what the world of Illumina looks like at the moment. So I think I covered everything that I've added for now. Like I said, I've got a lot of work left to do to split up some of these zones a little bit further. I'm thinking that this is probably the size of zones going forward, like these, about this size, right? The Wuyun Plateau is probably about as big as I want to go with zones, or maybe Iskald would be that too. There may wind up being, and I'm thinking I'm going to have another zone in this area right here that's going to be a little bit different. That's not going to be sort of hilltops, but sort of very jagged, almost straight up and down cliffs with flat plains on top of them, sort of like a highlands type of area. A little bit different than the foothills here, right? So that's what I'm thinking is going to go here. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at. And yeah, I think having floating land in here somewhere is eventually going to happen. I don't know where yet. I don't know where it's actually going to exist on the map. But it'll probably wind up being like an end game zone or close to end game anyway. So not going to worry about it for now. Dr. Elliot, good to see you. How's it going? Welcome. You Game of Thrones fan? I've never read the books or watched the series. It's on my list of to-dos, though. But yeah, nope. I have not. So I can't say I am or am not. All right. So that pretty much covers that. And then I've gone ahead and added all those names in here. Like I said, these match up to what we have in the map. I should probably save that, by the way. And so we also named all of the various races that we have so far. I think I'm going to add a fourth race. I think I might add elves in here somewhere. But I'm thinking of making them like super rare. So I'm kind of considering doing that. But anyway, so the humans, there's 3 kinds of humans. Or I'm sorry, 4 kinds of humans, because I actually split them off, right? So the Zanari and the Satoru were sort of all in the same group, but I split them off. So the Zanari, finish saving. I guess it doesn't save if I click off the tab. All right, so the Zanari live here, and the Satoru live here, right? So there's those. The Skaldar are sort of the Norse guys, the Vikings. They live up here. And then the Zuldians, they are where you might expect Zuldane, right? And these guys are the conquerors, so they're kind of all over the place. This is their main bastion of power, but they're over here in Wayport. They're all over the place in the world, right? These are also the guys that came up from Duskvale, right? So there's those 4. The descriptions haven't really changed other than that. Misspelled plateaus. All right, so trolls, we have 2 sets of trolls like we did before. This again, the descriptions haven't changed. The Zulgur trolls are the guys that are sort of the bad guys, right? They're the ones that are super aggressive towards us in the beginning, even though we figure out why later on. Wrong capital there. And then we have the Vakoran trolls, which are a peaceful sort of subset of trolls, and they live in the jungles over here. So they live here, and they also live in Osher's Reach, right? And they're a very small subset that stayed behind when this area got destroyed. Most of them moved here. Some of them stayed here, but they can't basically stand the way that these guys operate, so they kind of broke off from them. So that's those 2. The dwarves, the Bloodbane dwarves are sort of the murderous little ones that we talked about. And so that's those guys. And then the Hailstone dwarves are the other ones. So the Bloodbane dwarves are kind of scattered all over the place. The Hailstone dwarves live up here in Thornholt, right? And the surrounding areas, right? So Hammerfield, this is also very much a dwarven area. Probably with some human settlements as well, but that's what all of this is. All right, so we already went over the continents, so I'm not going to go over that. We named the oceans, and then we did name the religions as well. So the Dawn Keepers are basically, you know what? I should probably. I guess it doesn't matter what order, right? We name the types of arcane as well. So arcane is now called anima. So that's sort of the underlying ability to channel, the life energy from the planet, right? And then there's different names for that anima depending on the different religions and or different sects of humans and dwarves or whatnot from around the world. So one of those is Solara, right? And those that is believed in by the Dawn Keepers. So the Dawn Keepers believe in Solara. And these are the guys that basically label all the other ones as heretics. It's kind of a mine is better than yours type of thing. And then, view which religion see here. This should be this. I don't know why I didn't find and replace. All right. So we have that. Then we have the sort of major opposition to that, which is Zorathianity, which I'm not 100% sold on that, rather. But this is basically the one that's driven primarily by fear by the old god of Zorath, right? So Zorath comes into play, the Zorath Scar, right? That's that god that got pissed off and sort of destroyed this area. And so they believe in something called Nixoth, which is basically sort of a dark version of that anima. And we'll get into that for a second. The followers are called Zorathians, right? Hence Zorathianity. Again, I'm not 100% sold on this, but I couldn't think of a better name for it in the meantime. And then we also have Shenism, and these guys believe in Shenzhen. So this is the other name for the anima, right? And so these are the guys that are up on the Wuyun Plateau. These guys, right? That's sort of the one that's very connected to spiritual, the spirit and environment and stuff like that. So that's those. And then the 5 types of anima are Solara, Shenzhen, Nixoth, that we've talked about. Titanus, which is basically the anima left over by the dwarves of Thaldor, and Velora. And so, again, the description of this hasn't changed, just the name, right? So we now call that Titanus. And so the Bloodbane dwarves and the Hailstone dwarves have different beliefs on how Titanus works, but they both believe that is what the resource is called, right? And then finally we have Lumis, which is the final version of that, right? And so it's a distilled energy source glowing with artificial brilliance. So this is the one that sort of powers the technology, which we're calling Lumitech. So Lumis, Lumitech, the name is called Illumina, or the world is called Illumina. See the references there to to light. Otherwise, this hasn't really changed, right? And so this is believed by these guys down here, right? We don't have names for the wars yet. We're still missing some pieces of lore and stuff in between, some connecting pieces, but yeah, that's basically where we're at. Dr. Elliott, thank you so much for the Prime. 4 months. I really appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Let's see. Wayne from DS9 is the best. Proud to have a plateau. Nice. I didn't even think about that. Really going all out on this one. Trying to, anyways. Render Goblin, how's it going? Things are going well. We're still in the design phase of this. Although we might actually scaffold. The project tonight. We'll see. From little arcade racer to an open world RPG. Yeah, exactly. The arcade racer was just not. I wasn't feeling it. Thinking of moving my custom game engine to Unreal or Godot. Talk some sense into me. Don't do it. You already invested in making the custom engine, right? Just keep going with it. Stupid ads. I get that. 5 types. Is this inspired by 5-element philosophy or some such? So it's actually interesting that you mentioned the 5-element philosophy, because I think we actually do have 5 elements in the game that all of these things, or the underlying anima, are used to create, right? In terms of magic. Overdrive 2069 is shelved for now. Yes. Yeah, we're moving away from that one just because I wasn't really feeling it, and I did a little bit deeper digging into the market, and vehicular combat games don't really sell all that well. So I'm going to rethink that idea, and I'm going to table it for now. And we're going to build this instead, because this is the game I actually wanted to build anyway. All right. So we've got to figure out eventually names for this. I don't need to do that on stream. Let's see. Wanted world mechanics. We have some of that in here. Did I add combat mechanics? I thought I added a couple things in here too. Maybe I didn't though. I put a whole bunch of additional name ideas for places in here. Although I think I saw one in here I actually used, so I should get rid of that one. This one. Maybe an icy zone with an active volcano in it. We have that one. Okay. So I think that just about covers all of this, right? I think that's all of the changes, right? I worked in names to just about everything. It looks like I missed stuff in a couple places, but other than that, I think we're good. By next week, I may also add elves in here. I haven't really decided yet how I want to do that. Let's see. I'm in agreement. Vehicular combat is a niche, I think. Yeah, it definitely is. Let's see. Apotham, good to see you. Welcome. Depending on the art style, I have someone I use for all 3D modeling. Would love to pad their resume more. I'm going to try and do it myself. There are going to be aspects of it that I'm probably going to have to farm out, but I'm going to try and do all of it myself. Because I actually do have a background in art, so I should use that. Okay. So let's talk. I guess let's talk a little bit about. Let's see. Did we have anything left on mechanics that we didn't kind of talk about? Loop mechanic. I guess that is not necessarily as important right now, although it's going to be necessary at some point. Player movement relatively restricted, running around mostly bound to the ground using physics system we already have. I don't know if there's going to be jumping. Also, there's kind of a decision we need to make here. So we're not going to be able to make this like fully open world, like a World of Warcraft type deal with very little loading screens, right? World of Warcraft basically has like a loading screen for each continent. And then they stream in sort of the scenes or the zones as you run through them. I've decided against doing that because there's a lot of complexity underlying in that to get it to work that way. And I think I'm going to do something else instead. So one thing that I've kind of talked a little bit about on stream before is the concept of having more than one active scene. And what I mean by this is essentially each one of these zones would wind up being a scene. I guess let's use, I guess we could use this as an example, or I guess we could go down here. Let's go down here and use this as an example. So yeah, this is probably a decent example here. So let's take the Zorath Scar and Thornmire, right? And going from one to the other. Now, one thing that we could do is we could say, well, when we get to a certain point on the map, like here, maybe, we either cross into a trigger that auto loads, right, and basically shows us a loading screen, stops rendering this scene, loads this scene, and then as soon as this scene is loaded, it brings us back in and we can move around. You could do that by just entering a particular 3D trigger in space, or maybe it's a context sensitive thing where you go up to sort of a barrier where you have to actually hit like X or something to go through. You could do it that way, where you have a loading screen in between, or in the way that I'm going to try and do it, and I don't know how well this is going to work, is we essentially put in between these zones, we already have like limited space where you can actually transition from one zone to another. So this is actually a pretty good example. The only way that you can get from Zorath Scar to Thornmire is via this bridge, right? Which is way too big, by the way. Let's shrink that. It does not need to be that large. And so let me move this out of the way so we can see. Okay. So essentially, what I'm thinking is we have a sort of um, a transition scene, right? So when we're in Zorathskar, we load up Zorathskar. We load up this entire scene, right? But along with it, we load up a few smaller transition scenes. And so the smaller transition scene would be like this bridge, right? Um, and what we do is, and you will have seen this concept a lot in other games as well, is when you approach the bridge, um, you essentially trigger a sequence of events, right? So um, you you have the scene here that sort of encapsulates maybe this area here, um, and you set it up so that you can't move through it very fast. And what you do is essentially, as soon as you enter this, you unload Zorathskar, right? You won't be able to see it anyway, so you unload this scene. And then as you're progressing through this, you are loading Thornmire at the same time, right? And so it takes you just a second, maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds or something to get through it, which should be in more than enough time to load up the next zone, right? And so as you're progressing through that, you're loading up this next zone. Or even we wait to unload this until you've actually gone all the way through, right? We could just say, as soon as you enter this, start loading this guy, and then once you get all the way across, unload this one. And then the process would be reversed, going the other way, right? So as soon as you enter it, you start loading up this scene, and as soon as you exit that area, you unload this one. And so that would avoid loading screens, and that's what I would like to do if we can keep it. If we can keep the zones relatively small so that they're quick loading, right? And I think that's possible, especially if we do things like instanced meshes and things like that. I think we should be able to do that, right? How big is this world map? Are you going for a massive open world? It's pretty big. Yeah. So I would envision, just for in terms of scale, because I don't have an official answer on that yet, right? But in terms of scale, to walk from Zuldane to Briarglen would probably take about 3 minutes or so, I'm thinking. Just straight hoofing it along this path. So to get up, if you're just hoofing it, right, and you're not using some sort of speed increase or maybe a quick travel, which I don't know if we're going to do fast travel yet, to get up here would probably be 10 minutes or so. And so we're not going to do like super massive, super huge. We're going to start off small. And my thought behind that is if we keep things to about that size, we can always expand. But if we make everything way too big, then it's going to be hard to fill all of those zones. And we may have to start cutting zones, which I really don't want to do. So, could do something like in Guild Wars 2, portal in between maps. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. So I'm going to try the, the whole having an interim scene and, load the next scene while we're unloading the previous scene type of thing. I might just go for a loading screen, right? Especially if it's relatively quick. So we'll see. So that's something that we're going to have to build it out and try it out. I'm probably not going to bother even putting that in until we've got at least a couple of zones built, we've got some mechanics in, and the logic to port from one zone to another is already in there, right? So probably initially it is going to have a loading screen between zones. And then if we ever determine that it's too much or whatever, we'll figure something else out. You could just do pure open world sectors and never have to deal with triggers. Just load sectors as chunks as you move around. So I've thought about that. But there's multiple reasons that sort of becomes a pain in the butt. Yeah, and you mentioned one right there. Every now and then just reset to origin. So we would have to every once in a while we'd have to reset the origin of where we are in the world. Um, Otherwise, we would lose, floating point accuracy, especially in things like physics, which obviously would be really bad. So, from end to end, this continent is going to be too big to traverse without, we can't load the whole thing. It's just going to be too big. And so, like, we could chunk it up, maybe. I don't know how we're going to do that yet. I'm thinking loading screen between each is probably going to be the easiest way. And then if we ever wanted to, maybe we could find some way to sort of chunk them in. But I'm going to take the easiest approach first. And if I have to rewrite it, I'll rewrite it, I think. But yeah, the whole thing about having to reset origin every once in a while and all the edge cases that come up with that is kind of a pain. Let's see. I had no problem with 128,000 units before precision started breaking down. Yeah, and that's what I'm going to have to also test, right? It may wind up not even being an issue at all. Other than, loading. We might be able to just load the whole dang continent. I don't know. It depends on how detailed we go, right? And the other thing is when we go into something like a city, we probably are going to want to load that separately. I'm thinking. Maybe not. But cities are going to be pretty detailed, right? And they're going to have a lot going on. I don't know that I want to be having all that going on as you're just like walking around the edge of the city, right? So decisions need to be made there for sure. Sakella's Music, good to see you. How's it going? Welcome. Thank you for the follow, by the way. Appreciate that. All right. So that's one thing to think about. I don't think our current system, we can basically just load and unload zones individually, right? Which is where I may actually start. I suppose I could start by just making a big, huge thing and seeing how it handles it too. How goes the game design? It's going pretty well. We have everything named. Most everything named. There's obviously still stuff missing, and we need to further split up some of these, huge zones and stuff. Like most of the zones shouldn't be any larger than this, right? And I'm thinking the average zone should take about 5 or so minutes to traverse from one end to the other, right? Roughly. Your spatial buckets partitioning will be key to making cities efficient. Maybe do a fast early Z pass to include tons of stuff. Yeah. And that's the thing, right? It all depends on what kind of optimizations I want to put in place and what kind of things I actually wanted to do. Is it going to be worth doing all that stuff just to avoid a 2-second load screen? I don't know. We'll have to see how long it takes to load this stuff, right? So, yeah, all things we're going to try. We're going to try it multiple different ways, for sure. Okay. We should probably put in here player movement. Let's put in zone navigation. And put some of these ideas down, right? So traditional load, unload to transition between zones. Let's just say choose one of these. And then sort of a subpoint would be transition loading zones, right? Do we do that? Otherwise, true open world with origin resets if needed. And we're going to probably put one continent at a time would be loaded. Loading screen between continents. I think that would be acceptable, right? At a time. So if we do true open world, then yeah, that's kind of what we would need to do there. Again, we would need to support origin resets in our physics system as well. So that's something else we'd have to manage. We might be able to get away without doing that, depending on how large this actually winds up being. So we'll have to do some tests in terms of, like, how far do we think this should be? How large do we need to... Excuse me. How large do we need to... how many units across do we need to make it so that, it takes the character X number of minutes to run from here up to here, right? How large of a scale do we want that? I think having it, like, if the player's hoofing it and we say it's going to take them half an hour to get from Talar to Briskfjord, I feel like that's reasonable, right? But we need to figure out, how large this landmass needs to be to make that happen. If you know how to multi-thread and spatial partitioning, then you can probably implement a better streaming than certain other better world streaming than certain other engines. Yeah, that's probably true. We do already have multi-threading, which is funny. We already have that. We already have a job system. Our loading to the GPU isn't jobified yet, but eventually it will be. I wasn't going to do that for this first release, but if we need to, we will. Just brute force it until it breaks. Yeah, right? I mean, I might do that anyways, right? Because the other thing I'm going to have to see is, like, maybe I can load the entire continent, and maybe it would run fine on the machine I'm on right now, but, like, what about a low-spec machine? So we need to think about things like that too, right? Because I don't want everybody to have like a stupidly powerful machine to have all this crap in memory. So it's kind of a balance of how much effort do we want to put into optimization in terms of loading everything at once, or do we just not want to even bother with that? Or, we need to answer those questions. And the only way to do that is to test that stuff, right? So, zone navigation, that's going to be a big one. We're going to have to choose that fairly early. All right. So we talked about inventory. I don't think we really need to worry about that just yet. Ability skill tree, no classes. That's a big one for me. I do not want to have classes. And the ability to respec. So we probably need to think about that at some point. But of course, until we actually get players moving around the world, that's irrelevant. Breakable stuff, definitely. Base building. So this is one that I'm not 100% sure. I'm still not 100% sure I'm going to do it. I don't know where I've landed on this yet. I've kind of gone back and forth a few times mentally on this one. Odd Oculus, raiding with a party of 29. Thank you so much for the raid. How are you doing tonight? Welcome. Let me give a shout out to Odd Oculus. If you guys aren't following him, he is making a pretty amazing looking game over there on Unreal Engine. Shout out to Odd Oculus. State machines galore. Oof, yeah. You can get stuck working on state machines for a while. But that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, eventually we're going to wind up doing the same thing. Yeah, Apothema, I tend to agree about that. I don't think base building is going to be something I'm going to keep. It was kind of something I was like, maybe we could add this, but I don't really know. I don't think we need it, right? So I'm tempted to sort of, forgo this, right? Saw some overworld map. What you doing over here? All right, so we are designing. I should probably give a quick introduction anyways to the raiders. So we are designing a quote unquote open world RPG. It's going to be a isometric 3D action RPG that encourages exploration, secret finding, digging into the lore, and really learning the secrets of the world. Right. This is the world that I've mapped out so far. It's very much a work in progress. This is only a few hours worth of work, to be completely honest. And so this is, in fact, it only got a name today. It's of the world of Illumina, right? Is the name of the world that we're building. We have three main continents: Thaldor, Valora, and Dravenholm. Sorry. And so, essentially, there was a bunch of background lore that we've put in. Right. I'm scrolling through it really quickly to show you what it is. So I can't exactly summarize all of it very quickly, but essentially, we have a few versions of humans. We have trolls and we have dwarves. We might eventually have elves as well. And so the idea is that the sort of backstory is that this Duskvale area up here used to be the human capital city of Dawnvale. And two rivaling religion factions within that city caused a civil war with each other, and ultimately wound up destroying the city and killing a bunch of people within it and permanently corrupting the land. And so Dawnvale became Duskvale, and the humans that survived here escaped to Umberthar, which is sort of a little coastal village, and they used that to escape. Most of them escaped via ship outside of that, right? The ones that remain here are steadfast on trying to stop the darkness and corruption that is contained within the mountains here from spreading not only to Umberthar, but the rest of the world. And they also have the hopes that they can restore their homeland, right? And so a bunch of these guys essentially escaped on ship. They came over here to Briskfjord, in the land of Iskald, which is sort of a Norse/Viking type of area, up in the snowy mountains, right? And they marched south, and during this whole event, there was a rumor that was spread that essentially said that actually the trolls caused this, and the trolls went in there and killed a whole bunch of people and used this civil war as sort of an opportunity to try and gain power. So the humans got pissed off. They basically marched down this road to where this is, which is called Zuldane. This used to be a troll city, and they essentially they conquered it, raised it, and then built their own city on top of it, and took it over as their own. And the truth of the matter is that the trolls actually had nothing to do with it. It was just the humans fighting amongst themselves. And so, essentially, one of the higher-ups within the trolls' government spread that rumor to try and overthrow the local government within the troll empire, so that he could then step in and take the power for himself. Except that it didn't work, and these guys basically took one of their cities. Now, the rest of the government and the populace didn't know about this, and so they're like, what the hell, humans? And so they obviously attacked them back. They were unable to get their city back, and so these two guys are now at war, right? And so that is sort of the main story arc, and then there's other little story arcs in between. Let's see. So eventually I'm going to have all this written up so that you can actually read it. But yeah, that's kind of the high level of that, right? And there's various religious factions that fight against one another, and there's also government factions that fight against one another. And so all these various factions around the world all believe in different versions of what's called anima, which is sort of like an arcane type of energy that feeds off of the life force of the planet. And so they all have different manifestations and uses of it. They all call it different things. The three main religions call it different things. The dwarves, who are non-religious, generally call it something different. And then the guys down here in Setsu actually use it to make high technology, and they also call it something different. And you, as the player, essentially discover the secrets of anima and learn how to use it to wield magic, which is a more powerful version than all of the other factions have. Right? They can throw fireballs and they can cast lightning bolts and stuff like that. But you eventually learn the underlying sort of secrets and spell weaving and all that stuff to essentially tap into the true source of it, right? So yeah, that's kind of the gist. You want base building and exploded barrels? Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm torn on the whole base building thing, right? Because where would we do it, right? Like, the cities all have, towns and stuff outside of them, so we'd have to find somewhere to put it. I don't want this to turn into something where you just stay in your base the whole time and you can do everything within the base. I want you to have to actually go out. And we talked about some ways around that, but I'm just not completely sold that that's a mechanic that we should add. Splody barrels are a definite, though. Yes, definitely, for sure. Are you planning a campaign with narrative elements? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's going to have... basically, the whole game is going to be just what you would think of as a campaign, right? This is not going to be a game where we have, PvP or anything like that. It's just going to be a single-player RPG, kind of like the old Baldur's Gate games or something like that. That's kind of the gist. Reminds me of my teenage years when I made custom maps for Tibia. That was very fun to do. I bet it was. Yeah, so this is kind of how far we've gotten so far. And we are going to build all of this on top of... Just pull this down here. We're going to build all of this on top of the Kohi game engine, which is a custom game engine that I built in C from scratch. And so up until very, very recently, this has been a game engine development stream. And now we're actually changing gears, and we're still going to be working on the engine. We still have things to add to the engine. Obviously, we're going to have bugs to fix. But we're going to be making the first game using the engine that we've been building all this time. So, we've been streaming the development of it. It is a open source game engine. It's available on GitHub. And so, a lot of what we have here is just sort of test meshes that you'd see elsewhere, right? But we're going to use this engine to build the game. So I guess I'll drop a link here so that you guys, if you're interested, can go ahead and check that out. And so the world is called Illumina. The working title of the game is called Illumina, although it's likely going to have something different. We'll see where the story leads us. And that's ultimately how we're going to do it. Let's see. Notice in testbed cap, texture between the leaves is seemingly not transparent. Is that handling of the transparency not ready yet? It might be that the material is configured to not be transparent. Default for material transparency is false. So unless that's set in the actual material to be true, that's why it would be doing that. So you just have to take a look at the material file itself. Okay. So I think that just about covers it. And then what we are doing essentially now is just kind of going through and deciding what kind of mechanics we wanted to add. And we were actually talking about base building when you guys came in. And this is kind of the section I'm not 100% sure where I've landed on this. If anything, it's not going to be an early core mechanic. If anything, it'll be introduced much later on in the game. So essentially what I'm going to do is right now I'm going to table this because it's not important to have initially. If we do decide to add this, it'll be much later on in the development cycle. Diamond,
Long
thank you so
time
much.
since I caught a stream. I got nerd sniped by Factorio for a few months.
You're not the only one. Thanks so much for the tier 1, Diamond. How have you been other than getting nerd sniped? Hope you've been well. Good to see you again. Very much appreciate the sub. Thank you. All right, so we are going to have some crafting, right? And we are going to do crafting in a way that actually makes sense, as opposed to just being something that's slapped on after the fact and doesn't really need to ever be invested in or done. So basically, the crafted endgame items are far more powerful than anything you can find or buy in the world, and that's by design. So that is what is going to make crafting worth it. Can you beat the game without crafting? Yes, you can. But if you want the most powerful weapons in the world, the only way that you can get it is to craft, right? And so as we sort of go through our crafting system, the idea is that we don't want to have it so that your low-level crafting items, you just kind of craft them and throw them away, right? Because that's always kind of useless and annoying. And it's just a time sink that doesn't really help you move forward. What we're going to do is we're going to find ways to make those be incorporated into later crafting recipes. For example, let's say that we have copper bolts that you have to craft. You might need those copper bolts to make a gun way later in the game when you actually learn how to wield guns, for example. And so you might actually be using that to make a endgame or near endgame item. And so crafting is definitely going to be a very intertwined thing that's added to the game, right? That's going to be very important. And the idea is that technically you don't need crafting. You don't need item enhancements or enchantments technically to complete the game, because it's going to be skill based. So the idea is it's going to be a little bit Elden Ring-ish, right? Where you can be a level 1 with a rusty dagger and go all the way through the game if you're that good. You can fight the end boss and just stab him with a rusty dagger a million times or whatever. As long as you never get hit, right? And that'll be a possible thing that maybe you can do. But most people are not going to want to do that, right? Most people are going to want, the upgraded items and to make that a little bit easier, right? The whole level 1 running is going to be very much a niche thing that people would do afterwards for a challenge. So crafting, is going to be very important, not required, but highly important, if that makes sense. Been well, took a hiatus from coding. Excited to get back to it. Awesome. Welcome back. Thank you for the follow, by the way. Surreal. Appreciate that. Making an action RPG. Yes. Crafting will be interesting. Odd Ock Raid. Well, welcome there, Tricky Lady. First time chatter. Welcome. Okay. Let's see. Praveen over there on the YouTube side says hello. Great to see the progress. Hoping to catch on the live. Still around episode 130 render graphs. Well, you're pretty far in, so keep going. Thanks for being here. Actually, you are almost exactly halfway through at episode 130. All right, at least of the engine series. Right now, we're in the sort of game development series. Okay, so somebody had asked about the 5-element, what was it, the 5-element theory? Is that what they called it? I can't remember. Somebody had asked about that because we have the various different forms of anima. And it was funny because we actually do have a few different aspects, right? So in this game, we're calling them aspects. And that's essentially elements, right? So we have fire, wind, earth, ice. We probably do need a 5th, right? Because technically this is talking about enchantments, right? And regen doesn't count in that. We should probably actually. Did we put it? Oh, we did put it in here. Okay. So here's the anima spells, right? So we have a regular version and a power version, right? So we have Fireball and Firestorm, which is an AoE, Ice Bolt, which is single target. So these are single target AoE, single target AoE. So Ice Bolt and Blizzard, Wind Buffet and Hurricane, Stone Throw and Earthquake, and then Shock and Thunderstomp, right? So we do actually have those 5 different elements in here. Am I? I guess all game devs look the same. It said you were a first-time chatter. Yeah. Spirit. What do you mean by spirit? Do you mean like spirit in terms of regen? As like a attribute? Because we actually haven't talked about attributes yet. That's actually a really good point, actually. We should put that in here. Let's see. That's kind of a combat mechanic, but kind of not, right? World mechanics. I guess let's call this. It really is a combat mechanic, though. All right, so let's talk about stats, right? Because generally speaking, we want to have stats that you can sort of upgrade, like energy and witch, or abracadabra, alakazam and Pokemon. I gotcha. Okay. Do you have an art style in mind you're going for? Yes, we do. Stats are more of a progression system. Yes. So I should mention we are not going to have levels in this game. I know I said level 1, right? Just kind of joking there, but like we're not going to have levels or experience anywhere in this game. It just doesn't exist. It's not something I'm interested in putting in. I think it's tried and tired, right? So we're not going to be doing that. Bake Snake, thank you so much for the Prime sub. I appreciate that. Welcome. And so we are going to progress via stats and via equipment, essentially. Thank you, by the way, for the follow. I very much appreciate that. All right. Thanks for the great content. I appreciate that very much, and welcome. I too don't have levels and progress through stats and gear. Yeah, I think that's going to be the way forward, right? Because of what that opens up is the challenge to just do like a naked run with the rusty dagger, right? Which I think people are going to want to do. All right, so stats. I'm thinking we have kind of the basic ones that exist in a lot of systems out there, right? We have strength. We have agility. And then we'll have intelligence, I guess we could call it. How complex do we get with this? So, strength affects attack, damage, and amount of weight player can carry. Agility affects dodge, and maybe attack speed. Intelligence affects. Actually, I don't know that I want to call it intelligence, but we're going to go with that for right now. So it affects what we're going to call the anima pool, which is essentially your pool of energy that you can pull from to cast, right? It affects the anima pool size. I guess I should describe that here. So, well, maybe not. I'll make a separate thing for that. I guess we have stats, and then we also have what do we call that? So what category of things is like player health, It typically be like health, mana, energy in a lot of games. I'm trying to think of what that category would be called. Um, it's not stats, because stats are these things. I can't think of what it's called. Modifier, but usually also stats. It's kind of stats, but it's kind of not, right? Intelligence has always been a bad name for that stat. IMO. I agree. That's why I'm like, I don't really like it. I mean, I've seen people do mind, but that seems kind of dumb as well. I guess it's yeah, I don't know. It's better than intelligence, I guess. Um I mean, I guess it could be really stupid and just call it brain, right? And then misspell it so it reads Brian. Um okay, so let's do I guess let's do player stats. I don't love it, but it's kind of like a separate thing. Um, so we have health, right, which is a pool of. Oh wait a minute. Vitality is one. Vitality. This should affect health bar, right? A pool of health from which damage takes from. If this reaches 0, player is dead. Right? And then we have anima, or anime. A pool of anima or magic energy. Resources. Resources is what I want. That's the term I wanted. So a pool of a health resource, right? Pool of anima or magic energy resource. Which is taken from to cast spells. Right? And then we should also have the last one, I think, is going to be... We're technically going to have a stamina bar. And this is a maybe for me, but like... used for powerful physical attacks, sprinting, etc. Drops fast. And then I guess that's also going to be a stat, right? Affects stamina bar. Attributes. Okay, so you have attributes for this. Yeah, attributes. I guess that does make sense. That makes sense. Yeah. And then stats for this. That makes a lot more sense. I would agree with that. Resistance, armor damage, endurance could be a stat. Endurance versus stamina. Yeah, I feel like that would be an attribute if we're calling it attributes, right? But like stamina is kind of a weird one, right? Because like your stamina rating is going to affect your stamina here. Like I don't know what else to call it. I feel like endurance doesn't also completely describe it here. Traditionally, stamina is the resource and endurance is the attribute that affects stamina. Right. I'm going to put stats resources here. Constitution. Maybe, but even I feel like that doesn't fully describe it either. I think you were right with health and anima being a resource. Yeah, I feel like these are resources. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to go back to resource with that. I think attributes and stats in this sense are kind of interchangeable. But yeah, these are kind of resources, right? Because they're a pool of it, right? So we could say this is also a pool of energy used for, powerful attacks, etc. Constitution is more like health. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. It's not really... Like, that's what vitality is for. Things that are consumed are resources is a good vibe. Yeah, I think so. I think I'm going to stick with the resources for that. How will you upgrade stats without experience? So, that's a good question, actually. That's a really good question. So, we need to have some sort of way to upgrade that. And there's only a couple of things that come to mind, right? One of them is some sort of currency, which you could argue is the same thing as experience, right? I think that's kind of dumb. The other one, I would argue, is you get those upgrades through items you find in the world. So the only things out there that can improve your health or your anima or your stamina are these attributes here, or an item that temporarily increases one of these attributes, right? But like permanent changes to this, I think should only be affected by items you find. So maybe it's a reward from an NPC for doing a quest. Maybe it's a reward that you find from going into a dungeon and killing the boss in there. And like maybe that was optional, right? But like the reward for that is you get, I don't know, a crystal or something that gives you, that allows you to up these things. Two stats you don't have are dexterity. This affects accuracy and dodging. Okay, so dexterity is yeah. That's what I'm treating agility as. So it affects dodge and accuracy. Because one thing I don't want to do, I don't really want to go over 5 stats. 5 might actually even be too many. I don't want to needlessly complicate it, right? I don't want to like overload the player with like all these different stats. I know some people love the hell out of that, but I feel like your general audience is not going to do very well with that. I feel like for the most part, 5 is kind of the max. And even this might be too big. We might combine some of these and just have it be like 3. Stamina as a stat is a bit one-dimensional. Yeah, I tend to agree, right? So like, but then, how do we then increase our stamina resource, right? Or maybe we don't. Maybe that's only increased by potions temporarily. Maybe we never increase stamina. That feels kind of silly too, though. Golden Lion, first time chatter, welcome. I do agree, though. Stamina as a stat is just one-dimensional. I do agree with that, totally. And that's kind of when I'm like, do we really need 5? Or should we kind of condense that list a little bit? We should probably put... We don't have a section here for progression, do we? I don't think we do. Let's put that under a new section. Right, because we've talked about this, but we haven't actually written any of it down. So there will be no levels or EXP for in general or for any system. Progression is achieved via better gear and or better stats, attributes, stats. So at least we have that, right? And so maybe we can say, actually this should probably be the main point, right? And so we can say stats increases can only occur upon collection use of a special item, i.e. a rare crystal, etc. And it doesn't have to be a crystal, it's just what I'm thinking right now. Because we don't want to go with currency, because I feel like currency is just another form of EXP, right? These items are only found by defeating bosses, completing quests, and exploring the world. Optional dungeons fights may contain higher rewards. What about fitness? That's interesting, actually. Because if we think about fitness, if you were to do fitness as a stat, that incorporates strength, that incorporates agility, and it incorporates stamina. So we can like combine those and just say your fitness increases these things, which might simplify it. Let's see, if I have a height map with a texture of the same size as Kohi, support rendering the whole terrain with that texture. Or only support rendering the terrain with repeated texture tiles only. Repeated texture tiles only right now because of the way that materials are set up. However, we are going to completely refactor the way that terrain materials are handled. We're going to replace them with blended materials. And we're also going to allow you to adjust the mapping per material, sub-material in a blended material. So technically through that, you'll be able to do what you want. You plan on stats being a simple spend, point gain improvement, or more of a tree of perks under the stat? I'm thinking probably just a simple point gain improvement. We did loosely talk about a skill tree. I don't know where I've landed on that yet. Because I feel like that's another thing that we could collect in this list that maybe we can spend, right? Or maybe another item that we can pick up, right? That allows us to do that. And the other thing I'm thinking, I should probably mention this here as well. Let me just write this down and then I'll circle back over to the comments over there. Let's see. So, note the items that are dropped, or I should say the items that affect attributes stats are specific to one attribute stat, right? Um, so you may have to go to a certain dungeon to get a vitality increase, etc. Right? We'll just call that an example. Right. So I think by fragmenting those items and not just saying, well, you just get this item that you can put into any stat. You can only get certain stat increases by doing certain things. And we can actually use that to increase the challenge, right? So for example, maybe we have a optional boss that is a really strong magic boss, but he drops a physical damage increase gem or whatever we want to call it, crystal. We could maybe mix it up a little bit that way. You could also combine vitality and stamina into constitution. True. That just makes strength really important to get. Yeah, I feel like strength really ought to be on its own, though, because of the weight the player can carry, right? I feel like that's an added benefit of strength, where like the rest of these, I mean, agility kind of makes sense. Mind kind of makes sense. But these, stamina, Most games, health is usually very powerful, and trying both damage and health to the same stat removes the opportunity cost of defense and offense. Yeah, exactly. So you don't want to be able to get both together. That's a good point, actually. Thinking about this for a long time. No, it's all good. I appreciate the input for sure. That's why I'm asking, right? Are you part of the handmade community? Not really. More as a lurker, if anything. I do watch that stuff, though. Just kind of on the sidelines. Stamina could also be controlled by the armor you wear. Heavy stuff takes more, light stuff takes less. I was thinking that. Like maybe, so if you wear super heavy armor, for example, and you go to sprint, that's going to take more out of your stamina bar than it would if you were wearing light armor. That kind of thing. And I may actually make it not even based off of what you're wearing. Well, I could make it based off of what you're wearing, or I could make it based off of what's in your backpack, right? How much weight you're carrying. Where's the mysterious luck stat? Math.rand. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. I've always thought luck stats were kind of rubbish. Right? It's a very weird stat, and I never liked it. I've never liked games that had it. I never sank anything into it. Never felt useful. Yes, Spiro, exactly. The answer to the universe equals math.rand, honestly. Lots of games have different versions of it, and it's either super OP or shit. I agree. Totally agree. So where did we land? I guess I don't think we should roll strength into anything. I think strength ought to be on its own, right? Because these two things are super important. You're going to need those no matter what. And the mind affects the anima pool size, and also boosts anima damage healing. So that's a second effect of it, right? Agility is dodge and accuracy. I think that's worth keeping. But these two just kind of, I guess, balancing strength, mind, and vitality, right, would be kind of a struggle. This one, I'm almost kind of wanting to eliminate as a stat. like maybe the only way, because I like the fitness idea, right? But the fitness idea I think is almost too general. It kind of rolls up too many of these into one. I think it's too far in the other direction. Could always leave healing to, or tie healing to vitality. I guess, right? But like, my thought behind having healing tied into mind is that if you have stronger mind, right, that's going to affect the spell that you're casting, whether it's damage or healing, and make it more effective. Maybe. But then you could also argue that having higher vitality allows you to absorb healing magic better. But then we'd also have to think about like magic resistance, which we haven't actually talked about yet. So I don't know that I want to go down that route. Fusing stamina and agility would be okay. That's not terrible. It makes agility kind of OP though. I feel like. In this old game, Ragnarok Online, oh my god, I remember that game. I used to play the crap out of that back in the day. Priest heals were increased by int and also by the target's vitality. It has been a minute since I played that game, so I forgot about that, but you're right. I suppose we could say that, right? Also increases incoming healing effects. So spells, potions, etc. That makes it a little bit better. A little bit more of a valuable stat. And then I guess, yeah, stamina is super one-dimensional now compared to everything else. But I don't know if I want to tie it to agility. Like I said, I'm almost considering just getting rid of it. And then saying, maybe stamina can only be temporarily increased via a potion or something. Endurance, perhaps. Yeah, I mean, that was another suggestion, but like, what about combining stamina and vitality into something combined? I don't think they overlap all that well. And I don't necessarily want to make any of them too OP, right? I don't want to have one stat that's just like an uber stat that you just sink everything into that and you can just flatten enemies and never die, right? And stamina honestly feels like just a bit of a point sink at this point. I mean, yeah, stamina is good to have, but yeah, I'm getting rid of it. These are the attributes we're going to have, and then stamina. Never, well, let's just say can be temporarily increased via items. Potions, maybe spells. Cannot be permanently increased. Carrying more weight drains stamina faster when sprinting. I think that makes sense. This is the interesting thing about stats. We could probably spend the next year's worth of streams to come up with new stuff. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I don't want to spend too long on it, right? But I want to have it at least feel balanced in concept. So that way when we actually implement it, we've got a decent blueprint of what we're going to do. Maybe stamina depends on the others indirectly, so you get a little progression through the game. Maybe. But I think by saying it can never be permanently increased, that presents a little bit of an extra challenge, right? Because your stamina is going to be a very important resource. Because it's also going to, like, if you're a physical fighter, it's going to decide, well, do I use a power attack or do I run? You know, that kind of thing. Okay, so health, anima, and stamina. I'm pretty happy with that, I think. All right, let's just make these stand out a little bit more. And the other thing is, as far as attributes and stats go, there are things that can increase these, items that can increase these, right? So, like maybe a piece of armor will increase your vitality, or something like that, right? Or maybe a magic robe will increase your mind, or something like that, a little bit. And I'm thinking probably most of those effects won't be too crazy, except for like super, legendary items or something like that. But if you wanted to make a fifth stat, endurance would be a good candidate to give better defense to physical and magical damage. That could roll up to stamina as an alternative to vitality. Is endurance the right word, though? Alternative in terms of scaling the defense route. Yeah, which is something I guess we haven't really thought about, right? I mean, you could argue stacking vitality is kind of a defense thing, and also the type of armor you carry. Well, yeah, actually, that would be sort of a defensive build, I guess. Defense and vitality feel kind of similar. Yeah, I feel like vitality is what you would invest in for a defensive build. And then also your gear along with that. And your skills that you use. Like a shield block or something like that. Which actually, I don't think do we have... Did we put that in here anywhere? Melee combat. Let's see. We don't have block in here anywhere, actually, which is actually kind of important. So block can either block with weapon, equipped weapon. Oops. Somewhat effective in reducing, but not eliminating damage. Let's do it this way. So either you block with your equipped weapon or a shield. Block with shield if equipped. And we can actually say that if you have a shield, fully stops damage, but shield takes damage. Right, which begs the question. Another thing we actually haven't discussed, it brings up another mechanic we haven't discussed, which is durability. I think this is kind of an underused thing in a lot of games too. I think durability is kind of important. We should have that in there for sure. Thank you for the follow, by the way. I appreciate that. So let's see. That's going to be, we have attributes and stats. I guess let's do melee combats. I suppose we should probably do a section for weapons and armor. Right, so like, so they have durability, and we're just going to have a simple, well, I was going to say a simple 0 to 100 scale, but maybe not, right? Maybe epic items have a higher number of durability, right? So maybe the durability, if this number reaches 0, item breaks and doesn't work, right? I.e., all stats, actually, I guess we should say no stats, or no stats, bonuses from the item apply while a broken item is equipped. Actually, maybe we should say broken items just can't be equipped. And if it's equipped and it breaks while you have it equipped, it unequips. Which is essentially the same thing. Durability is fine, but all broken items should be able to be repaired. I agree with that. None of that once the item is broken is gone. I agree with you on that. I hate that mechanic. Let's see. Broken items can always be repaired. Let's do this, actually. Let's move this to equipable items. This is kind of, I guess, its own thing, right? So, so equipable items. They have durability. If this number reaches 0, item breaks and doesn't work. Broken items can always be repaired. Broken items cannot be equipped and are unequipped if broken while being worn. Let's see. Will stats decrease with durability, or is it a Boolean thing? I think it's just going to be a Boolean thing. Yeah, because that's going to be really hard to test, right? And hard to be. It's not going to be very predictable in terms of fighting, right? And the last thing that I want to happen is like, if we scaled like the item benefits with the durability, the problem would be you'd go into a dungeon, right? Which a lot of dungeons are probably going to wear your armor out to the point where you have to repair by the time you're at the end of the dungeon. So you go through a dungeon, you fight a whole bunch of trash. Now your durability on all your items is somewhat low, and now you have to fight the boss. That just seems terrible, right? So if the durability is 0, it's considered broken. It doesn't. Yeah. I don't think we're going to do that. Just thinking about it, that wouldn't be something I would want to play, for sure. Almost certain your beard has an honorary degree from somewhere. Probably. Probably. It's got a mind of its own, you know? Jumping from full power to 0 is also a bit weird. Yes. Maybe we have some sort of warning. Should we also have mobile repairs, right? Mobile or on-site repairs. Perhaps very expensive or rare, right? If we allow it at all. Right, so I'm thinking we probably won't allow for that, but I'm going to make a note of it anyways, right? Because it might be nice if you're really deep within a dungeon and your stuff breaks or it's close to breaking and you can repair right then and there. But it would also be a good idea to have some strategy built in. Like if you're going to go raid a dungeon, you probably ought to repair your gear first. Yeah. Better items require rare items to repair. That's a good point. Repairing. So, currency, right? Does it cost money? Or items? Higher rarity costs more to repair. I agree with that. I agree that higher rarity items cost more to repair. But I feel like money is okay, because I feel like collecting items to repair would be really annoying. If you have a rare on-site repair, it's going to be like the Master Ball scenario, you'll never use it. Yeah, that's true. Save it till after you beat the game. Yep. Yeah, so I kind of... Isn't there a... I thought they had a strike through. There it is. I'll strike it through, but I'll leave it there. I'm not thinking mobile or on-site repair should be a thing. So yeah, we'll have to think about the currency for repairs for sure. Could make it common, but like a 3-time use per dungeon. Yeah, but I feel like that takes away some of the challenge too. Like smithing stones in Elden Ring, you have cheaper versions that you don't mind throwing away. Maybe. But I also feel like if you're sneaking into an enemy base, right? Or you're sneaking into an enemy dungeon, it really doesn't make sense for you to bust out a bunch of repair equipment right in the middle of the dungeon and like start swinging a hammer trying to fix your sword or whatever right in the middle of a dungeon. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like that's gonna get you discovered, right? And killed. Like I feel like you would almost have to like abort and go back out. Go back to town. Fix your stuff and then come back. I feel like that should be what it should be. Because I feel like adding this in there is gonna take away some of the challenge. Alright, so equipable items. So weapons. We have melee, ranged, And I guess we can call them animal weapons, right? If you have a very high luck stat, you can encounter a smith just before a boss. That would actually be funny to just like randomly put in there. Just a random chance of spawning, right? Just in general, even without luck. Luck is math.rand. You know, from a range of 0 to 100, and you would have to get 69 in order for that to actually spawn. All right, so melee weapons would be one-hand sword, daggers, two-hand sword, mace, clubs, that's probably enough. You can come up, I'm sure we could come, like axe, I guess. One hand axe. I guess. Okay, you know what? Let's do it this way. One hand. Right, so we could do sword, dagger, and then we can do two hand, sword, right? Right, we have mace. I guess we could have a club of each one, right? Club. An axe of each type, right? And then daggers are obviously always one-handed. And then there would also be shields, right? So these require a one-hand weapon to be used. And then also, spears and polearms. Yeah, I guess we could do that. I'm gonna kind of put them under the same. Oops, that's two hand. Yeah, spears, polearms. Want to have two shields? Yeah. I mean that'd be kind of funny, right? So anima would be so one hand. We could have a wand, right? Or two hand. We can have a staff. I guess we could also have a one-hand staff as well, right? Slightly less powerful than two-hand. And we could also have one-handed swords, right? We could have a magical sword, right? Otherwise, it's just staffs, I think. Unarmed punch. Oh, unarmed punch is a melee weapon. Yeah, good point. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I guess that makes sense. You want to have two shields and smack some nerds in the head with it? Love it. Sounds like a COD player. Yeah. That's very funny. I'm not sure what a clune is, but I'd hate to get hit by it. Didn't I fix that? Yeah, I think I just typed it by accident here. Yep. Scepter. Yeah, I feel like that's kind of sword, right? Instead of one-hand staff. Yeah, I guess we could call it that. Right? Just kind of have it be its own thing. So yeah, the types of animal weapons are relatively low in number. So ranged is really just going to be um, uh, like a recurve bow and a crossbow. Maybe guns, right? And so theoretically, a magic user, right, could have a one-handed scepter or a wand, and also be carrying a shield. So there's an interesting combo there. I don't think there's an English word for that weapon, but I want a roped stone build. I mean, there could be a magic shield, right? But it would just be a shield that's has magic properties, right? Or like looks magical or whatever. It's still a shield. Magic focus can be an alternative mage offhand, or like a tome or something, right? But like, I don't know. That's always felt a little bit weird to me too. Carrying around a book, like, it's always a little bit weird to me thinking about, here I am fighting something. There's a 600-pound ogre running at me with a club, right? About to bash my head in. Let me open my tome and flip to the page that I need and read a spell. Like, no, I'd have that memorized. You know? If I'm going into an environment like that, I'd have it memorized. Like, I don't need the tome. What do I need the tome for? So, yeah. That's kind of just logically thinking how I'm looking at it. All right. So, armor. There's going to be... How complicated do we want to get with this? So we're not going to limit what type of armor you can wear. If you want to be a magic user and run around in plate armor, you can do that. It's not going to do you much good because of the stats on it, but you could do it. Thinking more like a floating crystal that boosts magic power. Yeah, I mean, we could have, Anima Enchanted. Offhand items, right? We don't know if we're going to do the main hand offhand thing either, or dual wielding. Maybe they're JavaScript mages. They have to keep looking things up, right? Maybe they are. It's very funny. Assuming I interpreted JS correctly. No pun intended. All right, so armor, we have different... have different classifications, and then we have different equipment slots, right? So classifications is going to be like cloth, right? Well, actually, none, right? Cloth, and then we'll have maybe leather, mail, and plate. I think that's acceptable, right? So no additional stats or protection. Minimal physical protection, but better than nothing. Leather is going to be sort of middle of the road, right? We'll say average physical protection. Mail will be high physical protection. And plate will be ultra physical protection. the heaviest. And also, technically, the lightest. Let's just say super light, medium weight, or I guess we'll say medium, medium weight, heavy weight, and then the heaviest weight, right? And then so slots, I'm going to keep this pretty simple. I'm literally thinking head/helmet, chest, boots, maybe we do hands, right? I don't want to like wind up in a situation where we have an item hell and I'm just creating thousands upon thousands of items just to fill all of these different slots, right? The last thing we might have, well, obviously we'll have, I'm going to call it main hand and offhand. So one hand, two hand weapons, right? Offhand is only going to be one hand weapon or shield, right? Or anima item, etc. And then the last thing is going to be, WoW calls it a trinket. So I want to have like, it's either going to be earrings or a ring or a trinket, right? 10 rings and 2 rings. Earrings, obviously. Yeah, that's a bit too much. Let's see. Spiro, you feel seen on that one. You're talking about the JavaScript mage thing. May need to have my chat GPT in the offhand prompt for new spells. Agility debuff. Yeah, I mean, we actually have something to discuss, buffs and debuffs. We just haven't gotten there yet. So I'm relatively early/new embedded C developer. Don't program games, but I did follow a bit of your tutorial series. I'm sure you're asked these sort of questions a lot, but why did you choose C for the engine? How long have you programmed in C / what has your focus been resulting in you learning C? Okay, so that's a loaded question, but I will try to answer it as concisely as possible. I chose C due to preferences. Some of those are technical, some of those are otherwise. So my main reasons being C is a simple language. It's not bloated and overcomplicated like C++. And as a result, it compiles very fast. It's also super portable. And it doesn't tell me how to manage my memory. It gives me that control that I need. It pretty much ticks the boxes for me. I've done a lot of C++ in the past. A lot of my C++ looked a lot like C. And so when I decided to tackle this engine project, I was just like, you know what? I'm basically writing C anyways, minus a couple things. Why don't I just try writing it in C? And I did that and never looked back, basically. However, in terms of learning C, like I did learn some other languages first, and then I learned C++, and then I learned C. For anybody that's starting from scratch in development, I'm going to tell them to do the opposite of that, because it would certainly be easier than the path I took. So I would say always learn C first, then jump to C++, then jump to other languages. Just because C gives you the foundations of what you're going to need to understand, so that when C++ tries to hide things from you, you know what it's doing under the hood. And then, of course, understanding both of those things, C and C++, will help you understand basically any other language out there. So yeah, that's pretty much where it's at. I hope that helps answer it. How long have I been programming in C? So this project has been in progress for 4 years now, and I programmed C a little bit before that. So I've been doing C for just C, not C++, for I don't know 5-6 years. But I could argue it's been a lot longer than that because most of the C++ I wrote looked a lot like C. So it's kind of a nebulous answer. But how many hands can you have by the end of the game? 16, obviously. Off topic, but did you automate your VK vertex input attribute description at all? By automate, yes, it's configurable. If that's what you mean. Chose C because that's what you're comfortable with, or any reason for selecting C specifically? Like I said, I was already writing it kind of to begin with in my C++. So I went with C on this project because I was basically already writing C anyways, minus a few things that I was actually using in C++, like operator overloads, which I don't really need, right? And it was just stuff like that, and it's all stuff that I could just do without in C. And I did it as a challenge to be like, you know what, can I actually write a working game engine and ultimately make a game using just C? And that was the reason I decided to do that instead of C++. But yeah, I was already very comfortable with C because of C++, but yeah. I hope that makes sense. Fell into embedded accidentally due to my first company failing to externally hire, so they looked internally, moving from general dev into embedded. Hadn't touched C before that. Now, for the past 2 years, C has been my only language. Tried learning C++, but it makes me internally vomit. I agree with you on that. My issue with C, and probably programming in general, is input validation. Yeah, that's a biggie. Sometimes I trap myself having almost all functions do parameter validation, even though most functions are called from elsewhere, with param validation already happened. Yeah, I do that sometimes too. What I've started doing, and I didn't do this initially in this project, but what I've started doing is I only validate input on externally facing functions, so client-facing functions is where I do all of my input validation. So anything that reads from a file or any kind of user input or anything like that, that's where I do all the validation. And then I'm actually going through and removing validation on some of the internal systems, that aren't exported, don't have their symbols exported externally, so they can only be called by functions that are actually already validated. And so that's kind of the way that I'm handling it. I still have a lot of work to do in the engine with that in mind, but I've started doing that, and it seems like it's going to work pretty well. What was the hardest thing while developing the Kohi game engine? Believe it or not, sticking to it for 4 years. That was probably the hardest thing. I'm pretty stubborn when it comes to that stuff, but man, there were times I just wanted to walk away from it for sure. Playing OG Tibia on Linux, it's so cool, man. It's great that the developers made the client on Windows, Linux, and Mac. That's what we're doing here too. Yep, because I agree. That should be a regular thing, right? It's not that hard to get it to work. Could actually make the plot of the game be a metaphor for modern programming by making magic users be like programmers. Oh god. That means most of them would be terrible though. But you're right. I mean, there'd even be religions around that, right? Debug time asserts are useful, though, even in non-user code. Yes, I agree with that. I do a lot of debug just assertions too. I'm using it more and more, because that'll immediately just stop the application in its tracks. And then when you move to in theory, when you move to a release build, if you set it up right, you don't need the assertions anymore. Just what Twitter and Reddit needs, more people arguing. Yeah, I know, right? I didn't say I was going to call this game, Reddit. Um, it aligns with what I'm trying to move my mindset to until recently. For whatever reason, I wrote C such that everything was included externally. Yeah, me too. Slowly fixing my mind to only expose what's required, but it's such a paradigm shift. Yeah, and it's also not being too zealous in the other direction as well, right? And not closing it down too much. It's a balance. It's a delicate balance. You can say it as a joke. It could work. That's fine. That's very funny. Most are dogmatic, and you have an advantage of for not being like that. Yeah, I mean, it could work. You're not actually completely wrong. I could add like maybe a little plot line in there, like with our technology area that's going to be down here. I could add something in there for the lulls about it. Believe Tibia uses SDL, so it's easy to port over. Oh, if that's true, then yeah, it is easy. Naturally curious. Naturally curious. Thank you so much for the tier 1 sub. I really appreciate that support. Thank you very much. That means a lot. Definitely appreciate that. Okay. So main hand can hold one hand or two hand weapons. Offhand can hold one hand weapon or shield or anima item, etc. Only when a two hand weapon is not equipped in main hand. I suppose I could make a Key and Peele reference here and just say front hand, back hand instead of main hand, off hand. But yeah. All right. So I guess, yeah, that's right. We were talking about the last sort of slot. That's where we got to like 10 earrings or whatever it was, or 10 rings and 2 earrings. 10 earrings would be intense. That'd be interesting to render. Trying to incorporate tiger style coding, and has been quite pleasant experience. I'm not familiar with what that is. I might know what it is and just don't know that it's called that. You're welcome. Your tutorials have definitely increased my rate of learning C. I appreciate that. I'm glad it's helping. That's awesome. Just going to change partitions back shortly. I get that. Start with a mud engine and implement graphics. Yeah, right. I've done that before. Funny enough. At this point, it's just a whole wardrobe change. Yeah. I mean, I feel like this is the max number of slots I would want to have. I just want to have one extra thing. I'll call it a trinket for now. Right, because I don't want to have a necklace and armbands and rings and earrings and all that other stuff. Like, enough's enough, you know? Oh yeah, I guess pants might be important, I guess, right? No pants. You shall not wear pants in the game. I suppose that is kind of important. Might make wind aspected attacks easier if you didn't have these on, though, if you know what I mean. Pants are for weaklings, yep. Satchel. Satchel could work, but I feel like Satchel is more like the item that you would equip, not necessarily the class of item that you would equip, if that makes sense. Could have a belt. Yeah, that's just another one. Belts are just kind of Diablo 2 style. Holding potions, Diablo 2 style in a belt, yeah. Container is a class of items. Yeah. Well, that's another thing we haven't talked about as far as like inventory and how we're going to manage that. That's going to wind up being a discussion all on its own. Belts never do anything anyways. Yeah. Didn't WoW get rid of the belts too? Because they were kind of useless. Was it WoW that got rid of belts? Or was it Final Fantasy? I think it might have been Final Fantasy, actually. I mean, if you don't have pants, you don't need belts. It's true. Nah, we'll have leggings. You know, we'll have those. Not having pants would be weird. That'd be awkward, you know? I'm just going to call this a trinket for now. We'll to do it. All right. All right, so that's our equipable items specification, for lack of a better term, right? These things can all have various attributes equipped, or on equip attributes. I think that's fine. I mean, if everyone doesn't have pants on, then you're fitting in. That's true. You're not wrong there. But if you're the only one with pants, ooh, does that make you the weird one? That's a good point. Not having pants is not necessarily weird. The chest could be a long item of clothing like a gown. That's true. And I suppose it's worth saying that there may be items that take both of those slots. Maybe. Like a mage's robe or something. I don't know. I don't know if we'll go that crazy with it. I'm probably not going to go crazy with like robes and stuff like that because I don't want to animate all that stuff. Frankly. Right? So we'll see. We'll see how crazy we get with it, but it's probably not going to be too crazy. All right. I'm pretty satisfied with that. We didn't wind up standing up the project tonight, which I wanted to do, but I was thinking that was kind of going to be kind of a bonus anyways if we wrap things up early, which we did not. So I'm actually pretty happy with where we landed. You know what? I'm probably going to call this stream here. I think this is a good place to leave off, and then tomorrow I think we can jump right into scaffolding the project and at least getting a skeleton application running before we start implementing some of the other things that we have to do in terms of getting some of the mechanics started. Kohi doesn't use GLFW, SDL, or other cross-platform frameworks, right? That is correct. How did you implement X11 in the project? Why not use Qt or GTK? What about the future with Wayland? My apologies for all these questions. No problem. I'll answer that real quick. So no, I didn't use any framework like that. I used XCB and XLib and all that stuff. I used a combination of those things to implement it. And I rely on XWayland to run it. And actually, the OS that we're looking at right now is actually I'm on an Arch at the moment in KDE using Wayland, and it works just fine. So it's eventually I will implement a full Wayland backend, but I just haven't done it yet. But yeah, it's implemented from scratch. I mean, it's here. In fact, if we go to core in here, I'm going to go to platform. We have platform Linux. And we can see all the Linux things in here. Here's the implementation, right? We have a bunch of stuff in here having to do with displays. I've got to figure that out still. In terms of mixed DPI displays, X11 doesn't handle that very well. So that's a thing. But other than that, everything else works just fine. We have all the XCB stuff, all the handling of events, all that stuff hooked up. Input, all of it. It's all hooked up in here. So if you want to see where that is, I'll drop a link here in chat real quick. That will take you to this website, and if you scroll down on the page, you'll see a GitHub link here. And you can go ahead and just take a look through the code there. And that's how we did it. All right, cool. So that's going to do it for tonight. I really appreciate you guys sticking around and designing this with me. It's been a lot of fun so far. I'm really enjoying this process, and we're going to continue tomorrow night in our sort of design of this, and even doing a little bit of scaffolding work. So let me choose somebody to raid. Let's see who's online. Let's see. Thank you for the follow, by the way. Appreciate that. Speaking of which, if you guys are new here and you haven't already, I would really appreciate the follow, either on the YouTube side or the Twitch side, or if you're so inclined, both. That would help me out greatly. Trying to grow the channel and motivate people to hopefully get into the game engine development space as well as game development, because we need competition out there for tech in this category, right? So the more the merrier, and I think that that's always a good thing. All right, so just looking through here to see if there's something relatively kind of related. Kind of looking for something that's like game dev and C, but I don't know that I'm going to find it tonight. Maybe not. Just bear with me just a second here while I find somebody. All right, let's go with, I guess since I have to get up in the morning, I'm just going to raid somebody that I've raided before, which is fine, but I'm going to have to raid and run. You know what, actually, let's do, oh wait, oh, I hate when their list refreshes. All right, we're going to raid Jitspo tonight. He is making a pretty sweet looking retro FPS and Godot. And I'm not exactly sure what he is working on at the moment, but we're gonna check in with him. I would ask him also to show the book mechanic. He essentially implemented a pretty cool mechanic with books in the game, so I would definitely ask him about that if you haven't already. And yeah, we're gonna go ahead and raid him, and I will see you guys on the next one. So thank you so much for being here. See ya.